Before we get into this, let's clear the air. The REDMAGIC 11 Air is thinner than the Pro, but no, it's not an ultra thin phone, so get that out your head right now. Samsung made a thin phone, Apple made a thin phone, this is a thinner phone by REDMAGIC, but it's not exactly thin at under 8mm, if that makes sense. I feel like this should be called the REDMAGIC 11, without the suffix. Alright, so with that confusion out the way, let's focus on the actual phone. It comes with everything in the box, just like the Pro model, including an 80-watt charging brick, but it's $200 cheaper, which makes it exactly the same price as the 10A, and by the way, it's the same thickness too, and somehow it manages to squeeze in an even larger battery, 1000 mAh larger to be exact, now sitting at 7000 mAh, which is only 500 off the Pro model. The Pro model still has it beat though in terms of wireless charging, since this doesn't have wireless charging at all. But this does now include a physical cooling fan, just like the Pro model, which the Air last year didn't actually have at all. Maybe that's why this is called the Air. But then the Pro would be called the Pro Air Liquid. But the 10A didn't have a cooling fan, and that also has the Air suffix. It doesn't have liquid cooling like the Pro, but it uses the same 24,000 RPM turbo fan, but its intake vent is actually within the fan housing, and it's not completely waterproof like the Pro, and can only survive splashes thanks to its IP54 rating. There's other components in its cooling system too, like a large vapor chamber and graphene. But its cooling isn't as advanced as the Pro model, and for good reason. It's thinner and cheaper. So now it's time for us to find out if it's actually worth saving $200 and picking this up instead of the already well-priced Pro model. It comes in Phantom Black or Prism White, and this time it looks a lot more like the Pro than its predecessor did. But unlike the Pro, it has a lot less flashy lights. There's customizable LEDs for the fan and the logo, and that's about it. It's simple, and I like that. The fan vents, buttons, and triggers are all larger and more squared off just like the Pro, so things look pretty balanced. The triggers themselves don't light up like the Pro and they aren't as big, but they're just as responsive at 520Hz. The backplate is more of a transparent look than actually being transparent. It's protected by Gorilla Glass 5, same as the Pro, but its edges taper off instead of being flat, and its camera sensors are above the backplate instead of within the backplate like you see with the Pro model, so it's not completely flat. So if you actually factor those protruding sensors into the overall thickness, then it's actually thicker than the Pro model. I mean, you're not exactly going to be holding the sensors, I'm just pointing that out. The aluminum rails are flat though, and so is the screen, which is protected by Gorilla Glass 7i, same as the Pro. Its actual display is identical to the Pro 2. It has the same 6.85-inch AMOLED panel with the same resolution, brightness, and 144Hz refresh rate, though its touch sampling rate is a bit lower at 2500Hz. It also has an under-display selfie camera giving you that all-screen experience, but its bezels are a tiny, and I mean a tiny bit thicker. I doubt you'd even notice a difference, to be honest. There's still an always-on display, but it has an optical fingerprint sensor, and it's fine. It's just not as quick as the ultrasonic one you see in the Pro. Software is the same though, REDMAGIC OS 11, Android 16. It's more than usable on the daily, and its UI is actually really nice. There's still no large folders though, which sucks, but there are interactive widgets, and we also get Google goodies like Discover, Circle to Search, and Gemini. And just like with the Pro model, we also get a magic key, which opens game space or can be customized to a shortcut, like switching between different sound profiles. Unlike the Pro, it's a button and not a switch, which I actually prefer. And it's also at the top left instead of under the power button, which I also prefer. REDMAGIC, please implement the magic key like this on your next flagship. Thanks. There's also still an IR blaster, which is great, NFC with payments and Android Auto support, and dual SIM 5G. But just like with the Pro model, there's still no eSIM support. The Pro model does, however, have a USB 3.2 port, and this does not. This has a USB 2.0 port, which means it doesn't double up as a display port. Which means no, you cannot connect it to an external monitor using a wire for zero latency and lag, which kinda sucks. I mean, you can still do it wirelessly, but it sucks because this is one of the most used features for REDMAGIC devices. A lot of you guys always speak about it in the comment section of all my REDMAGIC videos, being able to connect it wired and have like a little gaming hub. And because this is such a well-known feature of REDMAGIC, I feel like this is probably the biggest deal breaker for most people when it comes to the Air. But there is another deal breaker. The Air has no headphone jack. Thankfully, it does have a very powerful flagship Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset, but that's last year's chipset. So same as the REDMAGIC 10 Pro, and worse than the 10S Pro as that uses an overclocked version of this chip. It does now, however, use the new Red Core R4 dedicated gaming chip, but it's paired with up to 16 gigs of LPDDR5X Ultra RAM and up to 512 gigs of UFS 4.1 storage. The 10, 10S, and 11 Pro all use faster LPDDR5T RAM and UFS 4.1 Pro storage, so there's another few cutbacks there. But how does it game? Well, of course, game space looks the same and all the in-game features are the same too, with things like bypass charging, an info panel, and touch trigger customizations. I have to point out though that those triggers are smaller and a lot closer to the edge, so it's not as comfortable to use them when compared to the Pro version's triggers. The Air also benefits from image upscaling and frame interpolation just like the Pro to push 60 FPS capped games like Genshin Impact up to 120, and even at maxed out settings, this phone kept it at a solid 120 FPS the whole time playing. It's the same case when using interpolation in Wuthering Waves, which is a much more demanding game to play by the way. It stayed pretty close to 120 FPS most of the time even at max settings. It just wasn't quite as stable as the 10S Pro or 11 Pro, probably due to less room for heat dissipation. Call of Duty Mobile played very well though. 144Hz mode can now be paired up with the very high graphics presets, and even with super resolution enabled in-game, we got a solid 144 FPS the whole time, which is fantastic. The phone is not paired with a haptic motor as large as the Pro models, but it's still really good. The speakers aren't exactly the same as the Pro either, but for some reason they're extremely loud, even louder than the Pro, but they are less balanced and quality takes a knock at max volume.
John, standby.
Chase the checklist.
I've said it so many times over the past year, but phones have pretty much reached the peak of what they can actually do, so having last year's flagship chipset, it's actually not really a big deal. What does matter though, and what's actually differentiating the Pro models from the lesser models these days, are things like haptics, speakers, cooling systems. So if those things don't really matter to you because they're honestly just not as good on the Air, and that's where they are saving some cash, then you could just get the Air. And I mean, who doesn't want to save $200 if frame rate's all that matters to you, that is. And then there's the camera system. And I thought the Pro's camera system was bad. The 50 megapixel main and 16 megapixel selfie cameras are identical to the 10, 10S, and 11 Pro. The ultra-wide is downgraded to an 8 megapixel sensor instead of the 50 megapixels we see on the others, and there is no longer a macro camera, which doesn't really matter anyway. The ultra-wide looks alright, and the main is on par with the Pro model in terms of detail during the day. Don't even try go past 2x zoom though. Portrait mode's alright, but edge detection is average. The selfie is of course an under-display sensor, so I mean, what do you expect? It processes a lot worse than the Pro model though, and seriously over-sharpens things. Taking a selfie at night is also significantly worse than what the Pro model managed. And while the main camera takes a decent snap at night, the ultra-wide is a hit and miss. The Pro can shoot 4K 60 FPS, but the Air caps ultra-wide video at 1080p 60 FPS. And I think the only way you can actually use this is by standing dead still. At least we get 4K 60 FPS video when using the main camera, detail is a lot better, but it struggles to keep things stable. There's no 8K video option for the ultra-wide like we see with the Pro model, but we can shoot 8K main video, and it looks pretty good. So selfie video on the 11A is pretty much exactly the same as the Pro version. It's still capped at 1080p 30 FPS, still no 4K video, and still no portrait video as well. But I mean, if you want an under-display selfie camera so that you could utilize an all-screen experience, then it's just a compromise you have to be willing to take. I don't think it looks too bad. Let me know your thoughts, and let me know your thoughts on the microphone quality as well. But it's a pretty big compromise when selfie night video once again shows screen pixels when light enters the scene, just like it does with the Pro. If you plan to use the selfie camera, maybe give this phone a skip. Oh yes, and then there's the ultra-wide at night. Okay, yeah, let's not really talk about that. But video from the main camera, I mean, it's not perfect either, but it's quite a bit better than the ultra-wide. That's not really saying much though, is it? Okay, so the REDMAGIC 11 Air's camera system is noticeably worse than the Pro model, but I mean, the Pro's camera system is already terrible anyway, so honestly, who really cares? No one really buys a REDMAGIC phone for its cameras. There's so many other phones that can take better photos and videos. This is a gaming phone, but what else has been cut back in order to save $200? Well, the camera sensors stick out. The battery is smaller and there's no wireless charging. It has a less capable cooling system with no liquid cooling. Less LED lights, it's not as waterproof, there's no ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, no display port, no headphone jack, a slower chipset, slower RAM and storage, worse haptics, and worse speakers. But for $500, it's still a very powerful gaming phone with a physical cooling fan, physical triggers, an immersive, futuristic, uninterrupted display, a massive battery, fast wire charging, and a stunning design. I mean, you won't find anything quite like it for $500, but just don't go out and buy it because it's thinner, because it really isn't. Buy it because you can't afford the Pro model. This is cheaper and it shows. Just don't forget that the REDMAGIC 10S Pro still exists. As always, this is TechNick and I'll catch you in the next one.